So this scholar gladiatoria.
The UK police seem to have wrongly seized a collection of antique weapons.
So this scholar gladiatoria is drawing attention to this Warwickshire police story. Look at that, ads popping up while I'm recording. Basically, if you... Well, I'm even getting diverted from doing my video now by YouTube. If you don't pay them to go ad-free, you're not entitled to have a right to make a video about YouTube without being interrupted by adverts. How good's that? Not. So yeah, this Warwickshire police story, look at all those weapons. So apparently the police don't know the law, but I don't think that's the case. What I wanted to say to Scholar Gladiatoria is this. The timing for this to happen now, and it for to be in Warwickshire, right, is quite significant, I think, obviously because it's called Warwickshire, and, you know, the first three letters are war, right, Warwickshire. Ironically, I will throw in that, you know, Teletraffic UK, I was in Warwickshire when I went to Teletraffic UK headquarters to see Frank and Paul Garrett. Frank Garrett was, I don't think he is anymore, because I think that they scrapped it, but he was in charge of all the, he had his own company selling all the police weapons, all the police guns to the police, right? And I went round to see him, and he actually demonstrated this illegal slip effect, right? Which was actually one of my best videos. So, you know, like, you could say that, you know, if all the police speed guns were made by him, you know, they're all guns, they could all effectively be weapons, right? So, like, for me, there's a personal, kind of like my own personal meaning in this, like, reminds me of Frank and Paul Garrett, who did all the weapons for the police, basically the guns, right, the lasers. The police laser guns. So it's almost like if you raided Frank and Paul Garrett's headquarters, you could literally put all the speed guns on the floor laid out like that, if they've all actually been rigged by them to actually give the wrong speed or to be used basically like as a weapon, because they're not meant to have the slip effect, but they all actually can do the slip effect, even the ones that are meant to be, they're supposed to be, have a special certificate and be like certain settings on them. And I actually got these settings from an American company in a certificate, and you could still do the slip effect with it. It was a bit harder to do it, but you could still do it on it. I actually think that Paul and Frank Garrett actually made them so they were easy to do slip effect. But unless you ever got hold of one of them, you would never know. But I got some similar ones, and you could open them up and change the settings inside and all kinds of stuff. Like, they had like little lenses that you could focus and stuff. Well, that's just another little Warwickshire story. But anyway, this is the thing, right? So, Scholar Gladiatoria, right? His videos have started appearing and popping up on YouTube. Obviously, I'd never seen them before until maybe like in the last month or two, and then I probably have commented on them, but I've been watching them, right? So, like, Scholar Gladiatoria is, like, talking about the use of weapons. Now, this is actually quite significant because we truly are actually in an international situation at the moment where the police are acting illegally, unlawfully against political protected protests, acting beyond the law, right? You know, which is terrorism criminally. And there has been one or two people, you know, like there's the whole Tommy Robinson thing who's got loads of people, and there are various different groups, you know, and then you've got this Donaldson guy, that Richard Donaldson guy, he's going on about, you know, talking, he's like, ironically, there's a lot of ex-military people involved in this. You know, you've got Fast Jet Performance, who is an ex-fighter pilot, right, or teaches fighter pilots to fly. He's really involved in the whole national situation at the moment with his videos. And then you've got that Donaldson, who's an ex-army as well. But Donaldson's like, you know, talking everyone down and saying, oh, we just need to go on strike. We need to go on strike. Everyone just needs to go on strike, which I don't think that he's going to get everyone to go on strike, right? But he's like, you know, talking everyone down from taking any more measures or whatever. And then you've got Graham Moore, who is talking about the actual constitutional law, what is lawful or not to do when it comes to, if your government and authorities are acting unlawfully, what can you lawfully do? Well, Graham Moore has actually been talking about the right to bear arms for defence, right? But he's been suggesting that if you know that the law says something and it's not actually been applied, then you've got a right to act to do something about it, right? Now, my opinion is this, right? If you cannot defend yourself, then you can't protect yourself legally and physically, right? So, this is the thing. And then there's a question, are the police a standing army, right? They're armed now. They've got armed units. So if they're armed and there's not a war on and they're standing ready, it is a standing army. You could prove in a court of law that the police, because they have an armed section, they are a standing army, right? And yet there's no war on. So they're illegal, right? If the police, if you go into a court and prove in a court, if having armed police, right, is a standing army, right, well, this is the thing, how do you qualify an army? And, I think it's when you've got large numbers of armed persons, right, but yet there's no war on. This is the thing, but you say, well, in 1688, most people carried swords, so everyone was armed. Yeah, but they weren't put together as a body. You see, when Robert Peel invented the Met Police as a force, he's creating a body then, right? He's assembling a body, whereas you only had your sheriffs, your under-sheriffs, and your bailiffs, and you went and got warrants and you did a lot of stuff yourself, unless you're an old woman or an old man or whatever. You got the warrant and then you could go off and you could go do it if you wanted to, right? It was all about legal process and procedure, right? Obviously, you get sheriffs and bailiffs to do stuff. Not everyone is fit and capable to do it themselves, right? Well, I think when Robert Peel invented the police force, when they're all armed, then you're looking at, organisations and bodies of groups of people. So, this is the thing. Is it legal? Now, this is the thing, right? The right to bear arms is meant to be for defence. And in the Bill of Rights, in the first part, before you get into articles which are numbered, it does say about the authorities acting unlawfully. So if you're not able to protect yourself from unlawful acts against yourself, then, that's actually meant to be part of democracy, right? And this is kind of like what Graham Moore has been talking about now. Now, the problem is, this is the thing. I know for a fact that the security services and the police probably know what I'm watching on YouTube, like every time a video pops up, right? And what I'm saying in Messenger and, what's on my Google Drive, right? And that's just because I'm deeply involved in politics, contacting politicians all the time. And, this is the thing. And unfortunately, the problem is now that people are getting acted on illegally by the police, like the Blade some of the Stop ULEZ people and some of the Blade Runners, whereby they got a case dropped against them by the CPS. The CPS dropped a case, right, even after they'd been convicted, and they got acquitted. But then the police weren't happy with this, and they took revenge because they got the case dropped, and then they went after 8 of them, and then they accused them for conspiracy then, right? So that's actually the police acting in revenge, and they actually went after him for all kinds of different charges and stuff like that. So that's the police, they're not following the law or obeying the law. They're actually taking personal revenge and vengeance against persons because they don't like the fact that people have got the right to oppose their cameras, right? You know, their security and police cameras. And the fact that they're public property, we pay for them. We bought them, we pay for them. The police don't own them, right? No superintendent, sergeant, captain, you know, Met Police, you know, chief, they don't. We bought those cameras, right? They're public property, right? If the police chief wants them to be his, right, he can go buy them. He can go into his bank account and get his police officers to have a GoFundMe, right? And the police can buy their own stuff, right? And then they can say, they're ours, right? When we buy them, they're ours, right? We pay for them. It's not private land or private property, right? No matter how much the police like them, because they're their little toys, right? We bought them, right? And if we want to scrap them or get rid of them or, you know, going to kick off, right, throw a tantrum like in France, then that's up to us if we believe that they've been used unlawfully. Now, Noel Wilcox proved that those cameras had been used unlawfully with illegal road signage, right? Now, I don't know what happened to his case because mysteriously it went quiet, but he'd proved it in the county court and then he was going to prove it in the high court and then it went all quiet. I've got a feeling that the police intervened at some level, whether it was at the courts or in between, or because like they didn't want Noel Wilcox to win. So I've got a feeling there's some foul play going on because that's what the police do, right? And you know, we've got Paul Golding. They arrested and intervened in Paul Golding's lawful electoral processes and treated him as a private citizen when he was acting on behalf of you know, the political party, that people who were subscribed to a party and had funded the party, and he was advertising, canvassing the party. He wasn't acting for himself, right? So, you know, it's illegal and a criminal. It's contempt of Parliament when you even bring legal proceedings unlawfully, right? You know, so, you know, the police are knocking themselves out anyway by acting. But this is the thing. Some of them haven't been educated properly, but some of them are just, you know, they shut down the farmers, you know, protest the other day. And Parliament are misleading some of them, so you need to clarify the law. Now, this is the thing. The police have been acting unlawfully, and they need to face criminal charges for that, right, for contempt. And they're not going to like it, right, and it's not going to be pretty, but that's a fact. Now, at the moment, they're fighting it. They're trying to attempt to, we'll carry on doing what we're doing because they want to win. They don't want to lose, right? So they're actually fighting the public. And the problem with the police is because they're a big force, a big body and a big group, they like the power, the badge, the authority, throwing the law around, and they like to feel... you know, it's psychological. They like to feel like they've got power, right? But yet, in political actions, they don't have any power. It's absolutely got sweet F.A. fuck all to do with them. In fact, when they're acting as police, it is a criminal thing to do police canvassing, which is to have an opinion, right? Now, the best thing what the police can do if there's any political actions going on is, like, get the fuck out of there, go away, right? Unless they stand in lines in front of private property, right? Because people don't have a right to smash up private property according to the Riot Acts, right? Or private land. But in public, it's literally like, you know, like a playground, right? Like in France, like you've seen those scenes in France. So, and they can't get their head around it, the police. They don't seem to be able to get their head around it. The fact that, you know, it's our playground and we bought it, right? And when there is political opposition going on, it's just not in the interest of the police. Now, this is the thing. Police forces have a jurisdiction, right, in an area, Northamptonshire, Leicestershire, Oxfordshire, Warwickshire, Manchester, Lancashire, right? Oxfordshire, right? That's their area, right? They police the common law in an area, right? Robberies, car thefts, bank machine attacks, blah, 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 right? Persons who are engaged in private crimes. That's what they police. And they apply the common law into a magistrate's court or to a crown court with a jury in that area, right? Now, when people are on their way to London to oppose the government and canvass political actions, right, they're taking up a right which is got nothing to do with any of these necessarily local areas and jurisdictions, right? They're collecting persons to join in order to get the government to do something, right? And when they're collecting people from areas on their way to London or from all around the country, right? And it's a jurisdiction and an authority they're taking up. Now, the police, this is a problem. They've done all this training, they've got all this gear, they've got all the uniforms, and they've got all this stuff, right, to police the common law in an area, right? And they got all these high-tech gear, communications, handcuffs, fucking beam me up Scotty, the fucking rest of it, right? Now, the problem is that it's like telling the difference between a fucking horse and a donkey, right? Or a male and a female. They don't know what to do with it, these political actions. They like turn their head on the side and go, like that. They don't quite get it, right? They aren't to get involved. Now, they probably can protect private property from getting damaged, right? Or maybe stop you from going on private land, right? But when it is in public and when it is public property, they don't have any authority or jurisdiction, right? In what you're saying, advertising, promoting, or doing. And I'm not saying that people should not have peaceful protests, right? But if anything does get damaged or broken, right, out of whatever circumstances arise, people are not liable to a criminal liability, right? Now, there's some dispute and argument whether or not they have to pay for any damage on civil debts, but not criminally, right? Now, the 1689 Claim of Right Act says that you can't use protection to evade civil debt. Now, the thing is, in the common law for criminal offences, even in the Criminal Damage Act, it says you can use privilege, right, when it's on public land, right? And that's a criminal offence. I don't know whether or not the government can claim the money back for the damages through civil suits or not, right? If the group owes it to the government, but in the Parliamentary Papers Act, for example, they've decided to give them protection from civil actions, like if it's defamation or things like that, to private citizens, if you might, cause offence or defamation or things like that, which person would claim civil, you're not actually liable to it. So if they're saying that you're not liable to it under the Parliamentary Papers Act, which is only an extension of privilege for-profit bodies and entities which are disqualified from privilege because they're for profit, so they made that act for them instead, right? Then you're definitely not liable for them under parliamentary privilege, right? But that is the effects of the advertising and promotional thing, so therefore you're not criminally or civilly liable for the effects of the the campaign and advertising, right? Now, this is the thing. This is the question. do you have to? Can the government claim money back from political actions for damaging public property? Well, this is the thing. I would, they didn't have insurance and all kinds of things like that back in the day. Like, most things are insured for third-party fire and theft and stuff like that. And when a political action arises, they're a third party. And it's almost like, I would suggest that in modern law, because things are insured, then people get paid out if it gets damaged. So it's not like that people aren't getting compensated, right? That's what insurance is for. It's like the weather, right? If it's going to rain or if it's going to be a hurricane or if it's going to be a flood, right? It is down to, God, act of God, or it's just like the weather. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold. So, what do people do when it floods with water? Now, the emotions of citizens and the anger of citizens and the reactiveness and responsiveness of citizens, depending on what the government do, is like the weather, right? Emotions stir like the weather. People are angry and then they're happy. What is the cause of it? Well, usually it's the government that's the cause of it, right? Now, this is the thing. Therefore, if it just happens, it's not strategically planned or anything, if, the government are doing things and the people respond and, get hot-headed about it and annoyed, and the response is that they end up going out protesting and something gets damaged, it's, the emotional weather it's the emotional weather of the country reacting and responding to what Parliament are doing. And if people kick off in the town centre and so forth, then things get damaged. That is, I'm quite certain that it's if the government have paid for insurance, if the public are paying for an insurance, if the public, I don't know if public property like street lamps, etc., are covered by insurance, right? I'm not sure if they are or not. Or if they're, if they're not actually covered by insurance. But private property is now covered by insurance. It didn't used to be, right? So you've got all these insurance. In fact, when you've got a car, it's illegal to not have insurance. So every single car's insured, So it's like, they're actually already covered. They've already got insurance. So if something happens from a third party, the insurance company's meant to pay out, right? Or otherwise, what's the point paying it? I know that there's all this talk about, I lose my bonus and all this and that, right? But insurance companies, we don't just pay them for nothing, right? You don't pay an insurance company just for it's not like a ritual that has no meaning in it, right? It's like, what's the point? It was almost like giving someone money for nothing. It's like, dire straits, you're getting money for nothing. So it's like, just paying this insurance as some kind of ritual. It's meaningless. There's no point to it, right? It's like, no, we pay this insurance, and then there was a flood, and then it got damaged, so we get paid out, right? We paid their insurance, and unfortunately a mob came by, but it was a political cause, and, they ended up getting annoyed and caused damage to something, right? And if you're insured, you get paid out because it's a third party, right? So it's like Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, annoys, a million people. He chooses to try and take all their vehicles off them and hit them with these ridiculous, insane taxes, which probably are against the ancient liberties of London as well, right? But he chose to do that. Now, the response to that is not pretty. It's not happy. People are furious about it, right? Now, that is a response to what he did. Now, he's got to handle... If he wants to put that tax in and annoy people, right, he's got to... He's not getting prosecuted for doing it because apparently he's got the legal right to make these decisions and choose what the things are, but he doesn't like it when people don't like it, right? It's not popular. So he's causing the emotions to arise in people like a weather pattern, and then he doesn't like it when he gets blasted by a hurricane of people's responses in public and they go cut his cameras down, right? Now, either those cameras are insured or they aren't. I don't know if they are or not, but if they are, then... who's paying for the insurance? Us, like the people. So this is the thing. So why should the protesters pay for it if the protesters are, also covering the insurance, as well as everyone else. This is the thing. Now, I'm not saying, whether people should go around and cutting, ULIS cameras down or not, but this is the thing, right? So there's all this going on. Now, this Scholar Gladiatoria guy his videos have been popping up, and I've been thinking it's quite amusing and funny that, there's kind of like a bit of a national flavour for conflict at the moment, and a few people are knocking ideas about, do we need to defend ourselves, right? And then this Scholar Gladiatoria's videos have been mysteriously popping up, and it's quite a big channel, and he's showing people how to fight, with weapons and stuff. So I thought it was quite amusing, because... now this is the thing. Those farmers who are going to London, the police have got the law wrong. The police are wrong about the law, right? If it's a parliamentary cause. If it's just like the farmers have got annoyed with people at Alton Towers parking the cars around the countryside, and they're all going to drive their tractors to block them, right, and have a protest, and they planned it, then the police can ban them and shut them down, because that's just the farmers having a protest about Alton Towers visitors going parking the cars everywhere and then getting fucked off with it, right, and go and park the tractors there to stop them or block them, right? Now, if the police want to stop that, they can fucking do it, because it's a demonstration or protest, but not a parliamentary cause. They're not allowed to lawfully do it. But the Met Police they're like, oh, there's some action here. We like action, It's like cat plays with ball. It's like, oh yeah, we want to get involved in this. This is, it's exciting, like in fact, we want to get involved. We want to get involved in this, right? And this is the problem with Mark Rowley, right? Mark Rowley is wrong about the law, right? He is not right. And then he's having meetings with the government and he's in front of committees in Parliament, and they are not right. They're lying, and they're trying to lead people to believe that when it says protest and demonstration, it applies to parliamentary ones, and it cannot apply to them because they're not under the common law of England, right? And if an act of law did prevent you from using privileges, it says in the act you cannot use it in this act. Like the Bankruptcy Act says, you cannot use privileges to protect against a criminal charge in this act, which it does not say any such thing in the Public Order Acts, right? So the Met Police are already acting illegally as a terrorist organisation, and they've already prevented farmers from going into London to do their protest and inform the public to get support for it, right? So, and so we've got a lot of contempt of large numbers of police officers, right? And I don't think that they're going to do anything about it. So they're going to try and continue to lie about it and fight against the people in order to protect themselves from becoming criminals and in order to continue the lie, right? So therefore, if they do not stop doing that, the people will have to take arms up to protect themselves, right? And when they're coming through to London and the police try to stop them, they will have to use weapons to get the police out of the way and go back, 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 get away, back, 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 right? Back, back, back off, get back, right? Now the police cannot conceive and believe that them being paid money, trained, given uniforms, tasers, truncheons and AK-47s to go after common law criminals in an area who are stealing cars, stealing food from shops, breaking windows, vandalising things, right? As private persons under the common law, that's what they're given the equipment for. They can't get their head around the fact that they aren't there to get involved in farmer actions unless the farmers are going to damage private property, not public property in public, right? So if the police line themselves around private shops, right, and line themselves around, private land, then they're protecting the private land and private property, right? Well, they can watch everyone have like a fucking kids' playground on swinging slides, smashing the fuck out of the fucking street furniture like we saw in France. That is how it's meant to work according to law, right? According to law. And all this locking on bullshit cannot apply to a parliamentary cause, right? It can only apply to a tramp chaining himself to a fucking bench, right, as a private person. Or a choir chaining themselves to a bench when they're going around carol singing. Not a parliamentary cause by a observation of due process of law, right? By the Bill of Rights. Because it's not common law, it's the law of Parliament, right? Now, this is the difference. Now, I'm not suggesting that anyone do that, but the police need to back off, right? Because it's not anything to do with them. It's not actually anything to do with Mark Rowley whatsoever, right? Nothing. It is not his business because the people are taking up the authority and right to go about presenting an extremely strong representation with as many people as possible in order to get the government to make a law or change the law or do something. And if the police diminish or inhibit the strength of the representation, it will not be effective. So they're defeating the object. Now, in 1661, they made a law to say that you could only have 20 people. And if you wanted more people, you first had to get consent from a jury or 3 justices. But once you had that, then you could carry on and go ahead with as many people as you wanted. But that law's been abolished. And none of the laws, there was some temporary laws under the Sedition Acts, but they expired, they ran out. And they've never actually fully stopped it for individuals to be able to be protected or smaller groups. It's only ever been on a larger scale. Now, the Public Order Acts do not actually inhibit anything like the Tumultuous Petitioning Act, and the words protest and demonstration in those acts do not apply to parliamentary ones because they're privileged, and it clearly states that in the government review of those Public Order Acts. So we're being lied to about the meaning of those acts, and even the First Met Police Act says that privileges apply as if the act was never made, which means the common law offences in the act, like rolling placards down the pavement or stopping in the street or knocking on doorbells or singing or playing instruments. There are a number of offences which obviously cannot possibly apply when you're canvassing political campaigns, right? So you can stop in the street, you know, and you can go around the pavement with placards under the act as if the act had never been made, right? That's what the law is. And the principle is carried on all the way through, right? So that's just what it is. And I'm not wrong about that, in my opinion. I'm not wrong because people aren't reading the right books, and all the books you can read will confirm that is correct in the first Riot Act. In fact, other acts that were made at the same time as the Riot Act clearly state that protection is not a privilege. And then when it says privilege, it's not a parliamentary privilege. So in those acts, there's protection, that's one thing. Then there's a different thing called privilege, and then there's another thing called a parliamentary privilege, right? So in the First Riot Act, it says that you can't use protections in part of it for certain things, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't use privilege, and it also doesn't mean to say that you can't use parliamentary privilege, right? Because they're three distinctly separate things, as proved by other acts, right? So that's what it actually says in that act. Now, at that time, you wouldn't have had more than 20 people anyway, but unless you'd got permission from a court, right? Or you could get it from a jury. And once you've got that permission, then that's it. You can't be touched, right? No matter how many people you've got, except for handing it in and presenting it, right? So you can't have more than 10 people presenting it into Parliament or the King. Now, that's when they get the Royal Guards out, or you get your, AK-47 police officers around Parliament, right? That is what the suffragettes were trying to do. When the suffragettes were getting arrested, they were trying to present with more than 10 people. And they were hovering around in groups or in singles around Parliament, and then would try to go in like separate, like 2, 3, 4 of them going, and then some more going, and then they would try to assemble in Parliament after. But the rest of the act wasn't getting enforced. They weren't getting arrested for having more than 20 people knocking around here, there, or collecting signatures. They weren't enforcing all of the act, right? So they'd done already better than they wanted to do, because a lot of people were saying that the 1688 Bill of Rights was a implied repeal of the 1661 Act, and there was some various dispute over it, but they just decided to not bother enforcing most of it, and the MPs were fine with that. This is what Herbert Broom says in his book as well, but you can find the same statements in the suffragette books, various publications that the suffragettes did with discussion about it in dialogue, right? It was probably a little bit like now, when there's a little bit of misinformation going around, and even with great communication, some people don't know it and they're getting it wrong. So with even less communication back then, it's actually probably making it worse now, because now there's more communication, but more people talking and getting it wrong and not listening. It's actually worse. It's spreading more confusion probably than in the 1800s. And in the 1800s, you actually had practicing lawyers who actually knew this and worked in it, but now we don't. None of them have been taught in university, and it's fallen out of use in the legal sector. In fact, there were only about 6 or 7 parliamentary agents, and they only do private bills. Like, none of them have been practicing in it. And since the CPS was invented as a body, the Sikh Crown prosecutors are acting as one body, and they're not acting as individual solicitors who might have broken the law or brought in a legal prosecution and suffer the consequences. If one of the Crown prosecutors suffers a consequence, then the whole CPS get affected. It's like political parties in Parliament, right? If one of the Labour MPs, does something wrong, it makes the whole party look bad. Like Mike Amesbury or Dan Norris, whatever, or Patrick Spence. It makes the whole party look bad. So they don't want to admit these things, or it's difficult to get them to admit them when it makes the whole party look bad, because then they lose votes and they lose the polls, right? So this is a problem. The Crown prosecutors, they're acting to defend all of the other staff. But this is the thing: the Crown Prosecution Service says they've got to protect the services which they represent, but that they're interpreting it as in they're going to protect themselves, right? They're not interpreting it as we've got to protect the services to be run lawfully and not corruptly, which means that, we've got to recognise people's rights and apply them, right? And if we're wrong, we have to face punishment. They're not doing that. They're acting in their own personal interests as a body, right? To get out of being liable to, in the Human Rights Act, we become the victim and they're the offender, right? We are the victims of an unlawful act by the Crown Prosecution Service and police, right? So we've created these big bodies, and they're actually acting as it's a standing. I think that the police are a standing army now, right? And when these political things are kicking off, they're like, "Oh, what's going on here? You know, there's some action. We must, there's action there. So you just go involve us. There's action. Why do we sign up? We want action, right? You know, so like someone's going joyriding in the car or nicked it or something, or going driving, robbing bank machines with a fucking forklift truck or something, right? You know, this is like big groups of people, farmers, protesting in parliamentary causes, and it's like fucking Mark Rowley's like, oh, action, massive mobs of people. It's like Tommy Robinson's got 3 million people marching into London. We better stop some of them from going in. No, Mark, you're diminishing the remonstration, a very strong representation, Mark. You're making it from a very strong representation into a very weak one. Illegally. So people can't show Parliament that they don't want the fucking law, making into this or that, right? Because you're diminishing the strength of the representation, right? So what Mark Rowley needs to do is get his police in a circle around Parliament with their AK-47s, right, on the fucking picket line, and stop, people from, handing it in, or whatever, or, we'll just shout it, from outside. Not allowed to enter the building, right? And there is actually there's some parliamentary law in effect, I think, for being within a certain distance around Parliament, and that is to do with, that tumultuous petitioning act's actually been repealed, so there is no law on how many people can hand it in now, right? So theoretically, you could have as many people as you want, singing around Parliament, singing carols or whatever, carol singers. They didn't have to repeal the act, but they did. And then the same thing with the king at Buckingham Palace. He's got his guard. What the fuck? That's what the point in having the guard is, to protect the palace, right? That's the whole point. No one's suggesting that anyone has got a right, other than presenting the presentment, if they want to, form a defensive thing and get weapons out and so forth. No one's attacking, as long as no one's attacking it, right? You're not allowed to attack. This is the thing. See, it's for defence only. You're not allowed to attack any person. But it clearly states that if anything happens to get broken circumstantially, then that's the thing. But that was the thing about Roger Hallam. A public nuisance. You can't be prosecuted for a public nuisance. It's a common law offence. In his circumstances, not even conspiracy for it, but he ended up getting prosecuted and put in prison. That was what happened to Roger Hallam is completely unconstitutional and absolutely unconstitutional. And then you've got all these things like, petition for leave of court and stuff, which the courts are acknowledging, and using the bar at Parliament and so forth. So, but anyway, I'm pretty sure that the police have picked up on this gladiatorial guy, and they've just gone and done this in front of the newspaper to get a response and reaction from him, I think, because of exactly what's kicking off and, people getting interested in his channel. So I think that, this Scholar Gladiatoria guy has been called out by Warwickshire police because they probably likely knew that he'd get hold of the story and respond to it. So I think this is like a bit of a phishing thing. It's phishing. But this is the thing with the police. They've got their own press office now. It's like, we want to make a statement. We want to make a point, let's get in the media, And what the police are doing now is they're actually orchestrating their operations to join in the fun, right, to make a point. It's like, we'll do an action. It's like a police action, like a little police action, like a little Extinction Rebellion action. This is a police action, right? This is a police action, right? They're using the police investigations and work in order to throw their own little political puns in there as well. But yet, in the Representation of the People Act, it says that police aren't allowed to use police time, resources, and powers to make political points, because that's canvassing, right? So the police actually don't have the right to political causes while they're on duty, right? Supposedly. That's why apparently, I think he was in Brighton, they were sticking Extinction Rebellion stickers inside their helmets so you couldn't see them, apparently. Something along those lines. Well, definitely not for elections. Anyway, police weren't supposed to vote in elections when they were first started. Police didn't actually vote. And the original American government didn't have people who were in American government office. They weren't allowed to vote either, right? Because you're not meant to have... And this is a problem, how this entire government's become corrupt when you've got, they're all acting to defend the Labour Party or Tories, right? Eventually the main parties ended up taking over the government, right? And got deep-rooted seat in there. You're not meant to be allowed to be a member, really, historically, of Labour or the Tories if you work in government, and that includes like executives, when there was Jim Harper in charge of Revenue and Customs. I would actually bring all that law back in full force, because this is how our people in the government office do not follow the Constitution. You see, in America, they used to take that seriously, but then they scrapped it all, because this is to do with, you see, the Republicans have just put a video out, and they were like warning civil servants in America, government staff, that they if they took any orders against the Constitution, right, then it's kind of sedition or treason, right? Now, this is the thing. But they were talking about Democrats. Now, if the American government had the same principles as when it was first invented, like, when they created the independence, the Declaration of Independence, and they set up their own new government, you're not meant to employ police and government staff, except, I don't think that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because he's only on the cabinet, he's not like, he's not he wasn't elected, he's not a senator, he was appointed. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr., while he's the head of, Human and Health Service, HHS, whatever, wouldn't have been able to vote in American elections, right? Because he is an executive staff of the government. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would have to be impartial, and he wouldn't be able to support a political party. Whereas the senators, obviously, are members of party because they're voted for, right? But this is the thing. So you're not meant to have Democrat members of the American government, and you're not meant to have Republican ones, because then they're biased and impartial for executing, if someone's breaking the Constitution, and it might be their own party, they might want to defend and protect them. And that's the problem with the Crown Prosecution Service in England now. When, you've got Mr. Dowsett and Leicestershire CPS prosecuting people illegally against the Constitution, then all his friends and colleagues and mates are going to back him up and protect him in the CPS, rather than if it was just the police hiring a barrister to do it, Patrick Gibbs, and if he does it illegally, then he gets prosecuted, right? And it's not like a body or group, the whole CPS. This is the problem.